meeting of Wednesday, the 16th of October. It's quite a hefty agenda we have here this afternoon. I'll do my best to conclude by 4, but I'm sure you bear with me if it runs over just a couple of minutes after that. If we can have apologies for absence first, please.
Thank you, Chair. Apology from Councillor Mike Lewis.
Thank you. Any disclosures of interest, please? Thank you. If we can take the minutes next then for accuracy, the minutes of Wednesday, the 4th of September, page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Could I have some hands up in the room and online, please, if they're accurate for approval? Hands up in the room. Hands up on screen. Lovely. Thank you so much. If we can move on quickly then to the Audit Wales report, the first of Audit Wales report, and that's on financial sustainability review for the City and County of Swansea Council. Is it Matthew going to present this one?
It is. Pnawn da, Chair.
Welcome, Matthew. If you can take us through the reports and then we'll take questions and answers.
Of course. Thanks very much, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Just to say, this is our financial sustainability report. It was a national thematic that took place across all 22 councils, with local reports specific to each council. The majority of work on this took place between April and June, and the focus was on councils' arrangements to support financial sustainability. And specifically, we looked at the council's strategic approach to supporting financial sustainability. We looked at the understanding of the current financial position and also the arrangements for reporting and oversight of financial sustainability. Just to emphasise, this wasn't a review of wider financial management or individual financial decisions. And also, I think it's important just to emphasise, we recognise financial pressures facing all councils at the moment and the external factors that will set the context for this report, but they won't be alluded to in this report. You will see more on that in our National Summary Report, which is being published in November. So just to go on to the main finding in this report, we found that the Council's reasonable arrangements to support its financial sustainability, but there are weaknesses in the delivery and monitoring of the savings programme to support these. And just in a little more detail, the Council's beginning to develop a long-term approach to improve financial sustainability through the transformation programme and supported by its medium-term financial plan, but progress delivering required savings has been slower than anticipated, presenting risks to the Council. We also found the Council has a good understanding of its medium-term financial position, but the use of reserves in response to service overspend and risks around capital financing weaken its long-term financial sustainability. And finally, the Council has arrangements to regularly monitor its financial position, but does not report progress with individual savings or fully identify the impact of savings proposals to enable effective oversight of its financial sustainability. We made 3 recommendations, which you'll see in the report. The first was to improve development of savings plans to assist longer-term planning, and also to revisit longer-term proposals and align these with corporate objectives to help with that longer-term financial sustainability. Secondly, to ensure that progress against detailed individual savings proposals is regularly reported to members, to enable better oversight and monitoring of progress and take action where necessary. And finally, to improve its understanding of the impact of those savings on local communities and corporate objectives, and review how it communicates the likely impact on local communities. We received a management response from the Council, and we are content with the proposed actions in this, and we've received assurance that this will be shared with members of the committee. Finally, I'd just like to give my personal thanks to Ben and other officers and members for their involvement in the work and just for being so open and engaging with us. And on that note, I'll hand back to the Chair and happy to take any questions later on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Before I open up for questions, Ben, would you like to comment on the responses?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and my thanks to Matthew and his audit team colleagues. We have had frank and open and honest discussions and debates, recognising that they are our regulators, but I do try to be as open and transparent as possible, and we've had a fair and frank exchange of views, and I'm happy that the report summarises the position for Swansea. It is not surprising compared to the findings that are being reported in other councils. The management recommendations have been accepted and communicated to Audit Wales, and my apologies that they weren't included in the agenda pack. They will be circulated straight afterwards via Jeremy's good assistance. It would look dated August, but that's because the management responses, whilst drafted by me in August, were held up and waited until we got towards the end of September for the whole of the corporate management team to sign up to them. I think that's important to note. My corporate management team colleagues all wanted to endorse them and work together because it's not just about the money side of things. Crucially, also, all cabinet members received the report before we started our internal processes on this year's budget setting and refresh the medium-term financial plan. All three recommendations are accepted. You will see that when you see the management response form coming around. The latter two, absolutely. The first one, I have been a bit sniffier. Matthew will be aware of that, as will Gareth and other colleagues. I'm sure they've had very similar conversations in other authorities. Given that we're in a national inflection point while we're awaiting the new UK government's one-year budget, then a multi-year settlement for comprehensive spending review, crucially after we've set our next budget, because we legally must set our budget by the 11th of March 25. All I have committed to on behalf of CMT colleagues is some recognition of the longer term pressures for the forthcoming year, but that a full commitment will be the following year when we're informed by a multi-year settlement. Frankly, you've seen a report elsewhere, which is for information only on the agenda, and you've seen elsewhere through scrutiny and at Cabinet, our in-year position for the current year is robust and healthy. But as Matthew has indicated, it is robust and healthy because of the level of reserves and the reliance on those reserves that we are drawing down. So whilst there are no concerns in the current year, the sustainability issue in terms of an inevitable continued draw from reserves and the outlook being incredibly difficult and challenging remains the case. Frankly, there are more than enough things I don't know in the current year. If someone could tell me the local government pay award for the current year, if someone could get around to implementing the teachers' pay award in the current year, sorting out the teachers' pensions grant I was promised at the beginning of year, sorting out the top up for the teachers' pay grant in year, what may arise as a result of speculation on the UK Chancellor's budget. Is it a £22 million black hole? Is it a £40 million? Is there going to be more investment? Who knows? I remain in the optimistic end of the spectrum, but as the report recognises, all treasurers work closely through the offices of the Society of Welsh Treasurers, and we routinely triangulate and compare against each other in terms of assumptions we have made. And I'm pleased that my external audit colleagues have concluded they are reasonable. I've seen phrases like reasonable, acceptable, appropriate in most of them so far, with a few more challenges in a couple of the authorities. And I do wait with interest the national report, which Matthew has referenced, which will set some of the context, because I think it is fair to recognise that the Auditor General and his staff have recognised that individual councils are not islands in what is an extremely challenging set of circumstances. So I think that's all I need to give in terms of my officer advice. But rest assured, in terms of the internal workings on our budget workups, we are very much emphasising the medium term and looking to do better linkages to the transformation agenda, and being more explicit on what they mean for service outcomes for users, because those points were recognised in full. It's just on that first one I'm saying you're going to have to wait a little bit until I've got a clue as to what's happening next year and in future years from UK and Welsh Government, and I'm sure the committee would understand the reasons when you see my formal management response as to why I've been a little bit firmer in my response on that one compared to the other two. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ben. Before I open up to questions, can I just ask for a point of clarity, Matthew? With regards to your recommendation around monitoring of saving proposal delivery, did you look at the role that the Scrutiny Performance Panel, Service Improvement, Regeneration Finance have, and other scrutiny arenas where monitoring has occurred? Because I'm not seeing reference to it in your report.
Yes, and apologies, Chair. Just to say that the style of this report is we're trialling a new shorter reporting style. So whilst you can be assured we have got the evidence on this, you won't see it all presented in the report. That's one of the challenges we have in just making our reports more accessible. But yes, we did observe several committees, including the service transformation committees and the scrutiny committees as well. I think the point on this really wasn't saying that members don't have that overall position. We can see that that's clear and that's scrutinised. What we'd have liked to have seen is just a little more detail around some of those individual savings proposals. So from what we could see, we didn't always see that kind of level of detail, and I think it's probably fair to say that's important to see kind of continual progress with ensuring that all those proposals are actually progress somewhat. So I think that's really what we were getting at, rather than the overall position as such, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. So obviously I'm keen to ensure that we recognise the role that scrutiny plays and complements governance and audit and vice versa. And I've given the Chief Exec and the leader assurance that I would always keep that to the forefront so that we don't duplicate any of the work or worst case scenario, have any gaps that fall between the two. And Councillor Peter Black, I'm sure, would confirm that, as would Councillor Chris Hawley. So if I can open up to questions then. Any questions remotely first, please?
Chair, if I may be permitted, it's not a question, but just to contextually follow on from what Matthew has said, he's right in terms of recommendation 2, and you'll see that in my references in the management response. What that's getting at is that the report that goes to both Scrutiny Finance Panel and to Cabinet is necessarily at a high-level strategic level. There is a plethora of detail behind the individual savings strands. It is still work in progress, and that is acknowledged in the management response and in terms of improving the linkages to transformation. Being candid, one of the difficulties we have as a multifaceted, very large authority is some of our savings are arms, legs and fingernails, £25,000 items, and some are multi-million pound transformation items. And getting the granularity right so that we don't end up with an appendix which is 3 times the length of the budget monitoring report versus getting the strategic oversight. So to be fair, Matthew and his colleagues were not saying that there wasn't, Rosanna. I think it works well in terms of the Scrutiny Finance Panel scrutiny and what audit does to avoid duplication, but it's specifically around the granularity, and that's perhaps a little bit lost because of my oversight in not providing the written management response to that recommendation too, which is recognised that it's the degree of granularity which Matthew is talking about in terms of giving assurance on progress, as opposed to a strategic oversight, which undoubtedly Cabinet, Council, Panel, yourself with the paper on for the first quarter will see quite clearly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any questions in the room, please? David?
Thanks, Chair. Just one for Ben. I know we're waiting to see the actual written response from yourself, Ben, but in light of page 14 of the papers and paragraph 19, the second half of their paragraph there talks about the 42% of identified savings not being agreed and no clear strategy. Is there more detail in your response around that, particularly around the percentage and the strategy? Thank you.
So not in terms of in the current year, but in terms of, yes, in terms of the commitment to recognising we need to have less one-liners of things not fully developed. I mean, it's a common theme that I think colleagues, Audit Wales colleagues, have seen in other authorities. Some authorities do not quite balance in current year, some do not balance over the medium-term plan. Ours balanced over our medium-term plan, but there were some entries that were subject to working up what it was. It wasn't quite as crude as a savings to be found line, but there were still some hangovers from that. And one of the things that's certainly in our internal workings on the budget review to date, both members and myself have been putting a much harsher lens on officers and Cabinet members when they've been bringing forward recommendations to make sure that they pass the scratch and sniff test on some of these things, which is, well, what does that mean? It mustn't be so vague as to be meaningless. So I think it's limited in terms of recognising the gap in the current MTFP, but recognising that we do need to redouble our efforts. And I'm pleased to say that the internal workings with officers and Cabinet are taking that on board, and we are applying a much more rigorous approach to all of them. How it pans out overall will be heavily influenced by what we get and how much notice we've got of what our gap or lack of gap is for the coming year, because it's already looking incredibly tight and light again. I, like all treasurers, I'm really looking forward to having a multi-year settlement. We're supposed to have one concluded in March and give us 6 months notice in advance of having to work up budget proposals, not wait until December and effectively be in a tight window January through to March, where inevitably there will be some last minute running around and potentially some parking of some items that are here be dragons in 3 or 4 years' time. I think if we get a multi-year settlement and we get the timing right, and combined with our own efforts as officers and members to firm up on some of those items, you'll get some assurance from that in the next iteration of the MTFP. The longer term stuff will have to wait a bit longer, but I have given that management commitment in terms of next year's iteration of budget and MTFP to absolutely minimise the number of here be dragon type items, even going into the medium term plan. But time may be a necessitating factor, given it's another tight year, which committee and scrutiny panels have been well aware of, which is a huge frustration on my part and 21 other treasurers. Thank you, Chair. And thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for that. And thanks for the comprehensive response. And also, I look forward to seeing the actual management response to the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you. I can see, Rob, you're in observing. Did you want to say anything?
Yes, please, Chair. Again, given that this item also obviously sits with me as Cabinet Member for Finance as well as Leader, I just wanted to echo what Ben had said and support his comments here. And also to clarify, we very much do welcome the role that scrutiny and governance and audit play in this, and I think that does need to be recognised. I just wanted to add a little bit more of a wrapper, if I could, though, to what Mr. Smith said, because again, when we're looking at some of the comments that Audit Wales have made, and I fully understand where they're coming from around the need for more detail about how certain savings will be achieved should we need to deploy those in order to balance the budget. But of course, that completely ignores the point that you can point to either the UK government, the outgoing one, or the current one, the current Welsh government. Nobody is able to provide us with long-term planning assumptions that we can use to plan. And no politician or officer will want to close services, make people redundant unnecessarily. So it's really, really important that we do get into those multi-year deals so that we have the right assumptions available to us to help with our planning. Part of the challenge for all local authorities at the moment is that we've been hamstrung by single-year deals for many years. We've also then had huge variations in budgets because of the pandemic, and all of that has to be managed. But I would point out as well that whilst we have had some modest draw from reserves, we've also had large surpluses occur in recent years as part of our budget process and outturn reporting, and we have added to reserves. So again, it's at what point of the year you look at this, it's at how you view it, what lens you view through. But as a politician commenting in this committee, I just wanted to point out that no politician is going to rush to close a service or make an unnecessary change or force people out of their jobs until we absolutely know what the planning assumption is and what we have to do. We prepare for it, and it's to what degree you make up those savings and how granular they become. But the whole issue sitting underneath this has been the lack of long-term planning provided to us by national governments.
Okay, Rob, I don't want to make this a political arena. It's a governance and audit committee, so I note your comments.
No, Chair, it's not a party political point. It's a political point around the fact that if you don't have multi-year deals provided to you as a local government, it's very hard to plan.
And I think Ben has made that very clear. So thank you very much for that comment. Any other comments in the Gordon?
Yes, question for Audit Wales, really. Reasonable is not a descriptor with which I'm familiar. Can you put it in context, say, between acceptable and unacceptable?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question for us. And one of the things we had to be quite mindful of with these reports is just being really careful with our language. And I think really I'm going to put that back to Governance and Audit Committee, in that it's for the committee to be assured that these proper arrangements are in place. But yeah, it is an interesting one. I think reasonable would just be, these arrangements were as expected, but there's always improvements that can be made. And I think we've highlighted risks where they're relevant. So yeah, I think on that front, it's I wouldn't like to kind of rank it alongside other councils. These were individual reports for individual councils. And I think it's for the committee to kind of make its own mind up on that, just with the content of the report and the management response.
Thank you, Matthew. Ben, final word, please.
Yes, on that one, I do accept it's difficult for Matthew because the reason I was smiling, it was one of the things I fed back in terms of what's the difference between acceptable and reasonable and plausible, etc. Because there's lots of permutations. About 12 to 14 of these of the 22 are now published and they're on the Audit Wales website. And there is no obvious particular ranking or imbuement. You know, people could read each of those as slightly different things. What I would give committee assurance on, both in terms of the seriousness with which the management have taken it and the reporting through, is that reasonable or acceptable means exactly that, even though what does that mean? Because if you look at all of them, on 2 or 3 of the reports that have been issued, I will say it, the Auditor General and his staff have made clear that they are not satisfied with the arrangements made in at least 2 or 3 of those authorities, either because of weaknesses clearly identified in the medium term or even in the very short term and in the current year. So whilst I would, like Matthew, not want to get into a ranking order of what does that mean compared to someone else getting acceptable versus reasonable, you should be able to conclude from the management response and assurances I've given and the blandness, with the greatest of respect to that statement, that if there was something that was of great concern, it has been referenced in at least 3 of the reports I've seen nationally, and in its absence, it should enable you to conclude that reasonable means exactly what it means, or acceptable, albeit I accept that's in the eye of the beholder. That's a sort of particularly Sir Humphrey type response, but I think you can take some assurance from that. I'm a Sado. I've read each of the Auditor General's reports of every authority just to look for tips and tricks and make sure, you know, is there anything that we could have done better or differently? So I think you should take some assurance from that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, then if we can move on to the next report, again, another Audit Wales report, and that's Gillian Gillett, I think, the detailed plan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it is me. This is our detailed audit plan for 2024. Members are probably quite familiar with the format of this document, so I won't go into a lot of detail on it, but it does set out for you the work we plan to do to discharge the statutory responsibilities of the Auditor General and informs you when the work will be undertaken, how much it will cost and who will undertake the work. Firstly, it just provides a reminder of the Auditor General's 2 primary duties. Firstly, he has to audit your financial statements to give an opinion on the truth and fairness of your accounts. And that does include responding to any questions that may come from local electors in relation to those accounts. Also includes responsibilities to audit a number of grant claims, including housing benefit, national domestic rates and teachers' pensions. And secondly, he has to undertake performance audit work to be satisfied that the council has made proper arrangements for securing economy, efficiency and effectiveness in the use of its resources, and is also acting in accordance with the Sustainable Development Principle when setting wellbeing objectives. So in undertaking our financial statements work, we adopt a concept of materiality, which is that misstatements might result in the reader of the accounts being misled. And the materiality levels we're working to are set out on page 9 of our report, which I think is page 29 of your report. And this is set at 11.7 million based on your draft accounts, which is calculated as 1% of gross expenditure. There are also some areas where we set a lower level of materiality because there are areas of accounts like senior officers' remuneration and related party disclosures that may be of more interest to users of the accounts. So our audit approach to auditing your accounts is based upon our assessment of the risks of material misstatement. We've identified one significant risk, which is management override of controls, and that's always viewed as a significant risk in all bodies in accordance with auditing standards. We've also identified 5 other risks, which are set out in Exhibit 2 on page 11, page 31 of your pack. That's the valuation of the pension fund net liability. That's a large figure, which involves a lot of assumptions and estimates to calculate. So it's an area that we do focus on. And similarly, the valuation of land and buildings, also material amounts with a lot of judgment involved in valuing them. So again, we do quite a lot of work in that area. Then you've also had a new financial ledger system in the year. You know, the financial system is important to preparing the accounts and to our audit. And any new system increases risks around data transfer and integrity. So that's an area we'll also focus on. As I said, senior officers' remuneration continues to be of high interest. Your disclosures are quite detailed and complex. Some changes in appointments. Again, that would increase the risk. So we'll be doing quite a bit of work on that. And then the last risk then is provisions. Again, that's a material error involving judgment and assumptions. Just like to say that we have received the draft accounts on the 9th of August, after the deadline of the 30th of June, but considerably earlier than in 2022-23. And the work to audit those will be commencing shortly with the aim of giving an opinion in February. If we move on to the performance audit, our performance audit work is informed by specific issues and risks facing the council and wider local government in Wales. And the details are then set out in Exhibit 4 on page 15 or page 35 of your pack. This year will then cover assurance and risk assessment work, which you're probably quite familiar with, and a local piece of work on cyber security arrangements. Then finally, if we move to page 17, page 37 in your pack, that shows that our estimated audit fee for 24 is £445,578. And that does reflect a fee increase of 6.4% for inflationary pressures and also the ongoing need to invest in audit quality. And that's all I wanted to say, but I'm very happy to take any questions if anyone has any. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Gillian. Are there any questions for Gillian, please, on the report? Seen any? Julie?
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Gillian, for this presentation. Could you tell me how confident you are in delivering in accordance with the timescales that you've noted in terms of your opinion on the financial statements? You've set a deadline of February 2025. Is that deliverable for you?
We believe it is. That's what we're working towards at the moment. As I said, we've had the accounts. I believe we've got access to all the working papers. Obviously, it depends what we find during the audit process. But that's what we're working to.
Right, and you have sufficient resources to perform the work?
Yes, obviously, again, depending on what we find during the audit process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? No. Thank you, Gillian. We can move on to the Audit Wales work programme and timetable, and I believe Gareth Jones, you're going to present this one.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I'll take it that committee members have read the paper. It summarises, reflects some of the things that we've got in our audit plan, but also just takes you through the totality of the work that we've got underway, because in some years our performance audit work is still yet to be finalised. So, for example, we've got our work outstanding on commissioning arrangements, which we're currently in the evidence gathering stage, and we will bring that forward in due course. Our work on financial sustainability, Matthew's presented that report to you in a previous item here. And for 2024-25, the issue around cybersecurity work is obviously an important issue. Members will be aware of the importance of that. And just to let you know that our question for that audit is around to what extent the council's arrangements do reflect the 10 steps to cybersecurity from the National Cybersecurity Centre. So that's a really important piece of work that we'll be undertaking. And again, that's looking to be concluded by February 2025. And then obviously the report will be made available to members as we move that forward. You'll see that we're also undertaking a number of local government national studies, including one on temporary accommodation. Members will be aware of the pressures on local government in that space. So we're doing some work nationally, no local field work being undertaken, but we are issuing surveys to heads of housing and Section 151 officers in each council shortly. And you'll see then the work of our other inspection regulation colleagues from Eston and CIW for the number of links to their reports and our national outputs that have come through and those that are coming through in due course. So, Chair, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you, Gareth. Any questions, David?
Thanks, Chair. Just Gareth, on the page 44 of our papers, or 2 of 19 on your report, it talks about the unscheduled care thematic review. And I remember this came up last year as work in progress. I note now that reporting on this is taking effect from this month. And I
Yeah.
assume are there well, a couple of questions really. One is, are the individual council reports, and two, when would the Swansea one be scheduled for publication? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. These reports are undertaken on a regional basis, and so they're done on the footprint of the local health boards. The report clearance will take place with the regional partnership board because it is about the working between both the health boards and local councils. So the report that will come through will be one that is on a regional footprint, but there will be lessons, there will be recommendations that may well flow out of that for either the health boards or the local councils. We're in the processes of doing the quality assurance on those reviews at the moment, so those will be coming out in the next couple of months. But they are important issues across the public sector, and it does strike at that interface between both health and local councils. So that's why they're going to be reported on a regional basis, but then subsequently those recommendations will flow out, if they're made, for both health boards and also local councils.
Okay, thanks for that. In regard to clarifying the regional, obviously with the health boards and everything. Just on the next one was really on page, let me just get to it now, page 47, which is the thematic review on staffing resources, pressures in local government. I noted it's been deferred till, well, obviously 12, 18 months time. I just wonder what the background was to the deferment. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's a decision that we've taken as an organisation to address the amount of projects that we've got outstanding. We've worked with the local councils to communicate this and to make sure that we're able to programme our work effectively, and also to deliver that work in a timely way. If we put that into our work programme currently, we wouldn't be able to deliver that in a timely way. So we've pushed that back a little bit down that down the times frame. It's not taken out of the programme. We're just deferring that to start slightly later to allow us to have a more comprehensive and speedier response, and also turnaround in terms of the reporting.
Okay, thank you, Gareth. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions? I'm not seeing any hands up. Okay. Well, can I just thank all three colleagues from Audit Wales. Thank you for your support to the council officers and staff, and also look forward to continuing working with the three of you. Thank you very much. If we can move on to agenda item 7, which is the annual review of performance 23-24, and we've got Lee Wenham here to take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair. I won't go through the report in detail. I think you'd be pleased to hear that, given the number of pages. But just to give a quick summary and overview, the annual review performance is something we have to produce in addition to our quarterly and end-of-year performance monitoring. And it looks at the steps set out in the corporate plan and our progress against them, as well as obviously meeting our well-being objectives. But it also considers a range of other things as well, such as the resources we use, or staff, assets, budget, our contribution to the national goals, and also to demonstrate how we've been working in line with the Sustainable Development Principle, otherwise known as the 5 ways of working. At item 3 in the report, it sets out the range of sources that we look at and we consider as part of this. And then when we get into the meat of the report, each of the 6 wellbeing objectives has a strategic assessment, which is undertaken by the lead officer, which in the majority of cases is one of the strategic directors. There's an update on the areas highlighted the previous year for improvement and how we've progressed those. Our contribution to the national goal in delivering that wellbeing objective, and also how we've worked sustainably. Also then we highlight the areas for improvement in the coming 12 months. And with each of the objectives, we also have relevant case studies to show some good practice or areas of good work by the council. By necessity, the report is detailed and quite long. There is an executive summary at the start, which provides a kind of succinct overview. The reason for bringing it here today is to give the committee an opportunity to review the report and to provide some comments and feedback for us. I won't go into any more detail, Chair, but I can answer any questions the members may have.
Okay. This is a draft report, I understand, and it will be in a different format on its publication. I just wonder whether we can have it back when it's in that final format, because I queried why it was looking like it was, and it was understood it was going through the process of having that outward looking presentation for stakeholders and public.
There's two things I could mention on that, Chair. So one is that, yes, we've produced in a kind of council report format for here. We're working with Design Print at the minute to provide, as you say, a more kind of outwardly looking report. We're also hoping to produce a simple to read version as well, a much cut down version, but also using simpler language. So you've got two kind of documents in effect, but we'd be more than happy to bring back that kind of designed version, which uses better use of images, photographs, the highlight and different color schemes and a different layout. Yes, by all means.
And I also understand it went to the scrutiny performance panel on the 8th of October.
Yeah.
I don't know whether any elected members who were in attendance this afternoon was at that meeting just to give us a flavour of what queries were raised, if there was any concerns or issues. Councillor Peter Black, do you go to that meeting?
I am on that panel, but unless I was in Sardinia that week.
Okay. David?
Yeah, I can give some content around that. They thought the report was far easier readable than last year. Some improvements made to that, and in fact, they felt the report itself was less clunky, and actually endorsed the report. And obviously, the timescale of this will be, if we stick to the timetable, will be this report then will go to council after accepting your comments on the, I believe, the 5th of December. So I think that's where we're destined to go, subject to your comments.
Okay. I mean, it's a very positive report that I'm reading. I'd like to have seen some more of the challenges that were faced, as well as the positivity of, you've done a lot, but there were obviously challenges in that way, and some areas of improvement, which you've got towards the back of it. And the only question I would raise is, particularly on page 113, you've got transformation and financial resilience. There's a lot of work written in that page and in that table, and with a completion date of March 25. I just wonder, is that achievable? But it's it's a general point, but I would have expected the scrutiny committee to have raised those comments as well. So, but I would like to see it coming back. But in the interim, it's come to us for comment. Are there any comments anyone wishes to make around the table? Is it Ness, your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to say, I'm the lead director for that wellbeing objectives that you've just referred to in terms of transformation and financial resilience, and so I can give the committee some reassurance that these are the actions that we're taking this year to address, because this report relates to 23-24. So we have already been working on these actions and areas of improvement during the course of this year.
Thank you, Ness. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to agree with your comments, Paula, about the positive slant that's on the report, especially in the executive summary. I would have expected a more balanced view, that we're not only looking at key achievements, but that we're looking at challenges. There are some challenges identified, but it's embedded in the key achievements paragraph. So I would like to see that highlighted a bit more. On page 67 and 68, you state that the work is in line with sustainable principles, including looking ahead to medium and long-term challenges. That doesn't necessarily square with the report that Audit Wales has given to us, although I appreciate that that might be more in terms of financial long-term planning. On page 70, the second paragraph states that Governance and Audit Committee ensured that risks were identified, monitored and mitigated effectively. That almost sounds as if Governance and Audit Committee is part of the management structure. I did raise this last year, and it was agreed that the terminology would be changed, because Governance and Audit Committee provide assurance. We don't ensure that things are delivered. I don't know whether perhaps a draft report was used as a template for this year. And whilst there's good evidence of self-assessment, especially in terms of the financial management, there's a lack of consistency in the statements included in the report. I don't know whether that is because several authors have contributed to it, but I think the report really needs to be sense checked and there to be a better flow in terms of the information provided. So, for example, there are unsupported conclusions being drawn, such as significant underspends in both capital and revenue budgets indicate effective cost management and prudential financial planning. But then the next paragraph is in contradiction to that, page 71, which states that service underspending is due to delayed and slipped spending and is shown as an underspend, but the offsetting compensating carry forward requests for unspent and pre-committed sums for capital financing is around 7 million and is particularly significant for some directorates. So I think the whole report needs to be sense checked before it's published. And my last point is in terms of the low response rates to the resident survey, the budget survey and the staff survey. There's a statement included in the report that says that surveys provide the council with a wealth of information, but how can that be claimed when the response rates are so low? Perhaps you can look at all of those for me. Thank you.
Yes, there's quite a few things there, so I don't know if it would be
sorry.
helpful.
No, if I can, Chair, I'll come back on. Hopefully, I've remembered all of them. If I can just take you through. So the point around sustainability and the context of medium term and long term, I think that's recognising within the constraints within which the council operates. So the conversation we had earlier that Ben was explaining, with regard to the fact that our financial settlements have been limited to annual settlements, has made that more difficult. But within the ability that we have to plan medium and long term, the assessment that we're making is that it is against our ability to work within those constraints. The reference on page 70 that you referred to around governance and audit committee, we will look at that, and apologies if that's a repeat of last year's error. But just to say, this report hasn't been cut and pasted from previous years. It's actually quite a different format to previous years, and it has been put together as a new document. But in terms of the flow, appreciate what you said. It's always going to be a combination of people working together on it. And even though we have somebody sort of with overall editorial control, we will do one more read through to make sure that those inconsistencies have been addressed. In terms of that point around underspends being good financial management versus the delays in the capital spend, Ben will probably want to come in, but I think we're drawing the distinction between management of revenue budgets and the way in which the capital programme operates. And the final point around the consultation and engagement. We've had this discussion in this forum before around the challenge that we have as a local authority to stimulate responses to surveys, especially in respect of some of the things that sort of more general surveys around council performance, where we do find it harder to engage residents in responding. They're more likely to respond to specific service proposals in our experience. But the information that we do get from those consultations, we take very seriously. And so, to that extent, it is very important to us, and we do everything we can to try and promote an improved response rate each year. Hopefully that helps answer some of your points, Julie, but we will look at them in detail after this meeting and ensure that they're reflected in the final version.
That's great. Thank you, Ness.
Thank you, Ness. Ben.
Yes, Ness anticipated I did want to comment, and I don't entirely agree with Julie's statement. It'll come as no surprise. That's not that I totally disagree. There are several things going on here. From my point of view, wearing my miserly Section 151 officer hat, which is to live within means, it is reflecting that at outturn, adding 2 million or 20% to general reserves, adding 6 million or 45% to housing revenue account reserves or producing a treasury management spectacular that results in a £17 million underspend on capital financing demonstrates 3 examples of extremely robust macro financial management to bolster the authority's position. The bit I do agree with is that it has been a constant concern that in terms of operational delivery of capital there is slippage. So I don't totally disagree that when you look at the minutiae in the microcosm of individual items, there are areas of concern, but it's trying to do several things at once. It is reflecting on 23-24, which was itself a challenging position, but this authority strengthened its earmarked reserves on capital financing, strengthened its general reserves, and strengthened its housing revenue account. I'm going to say nothing other than those are astounding successes, and I'm going to say that, but roll it forward to the future, because we have had to rely on draws from reserves. The challenges in the previous item from Audit Wales remain entirely true and the case, and there is a middle ground on some of it where I do mostly agree with Julie, and I'm sure the leader and others would recognise exactly the same. It's come up in scrutiny and cabinet and council repeatedly. The delays and deferrals on capital are less exciting and interesting for those wanting to deliver schemes on time, but it's great news for me. Maybe I've just been a bit guilty of being a bit too myopic on the lens and just writing it from the views of Ben can add some more money to his jam jars. So I will pause and reflect on it, but I think actually there's much to celebrate on 23-24's backward looking on the revenue side. The pressures haven't got away, and I think Ness quite rightly identified that there is that distinction between capital and revenue. And it's not a surprise that there are differences of opinion on whether an underspend on capital is good news or bad news. For a mean old treasurer, it's definitely good news because it leaves me more money in the bank to survive another year. So I would respectfully disagree partly with what you've said, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Yeah, 3 points I'd like to raise. One about surveys. Yes, unfortunately, we've had this for many years that we don't get a huge response. But I'm sure I'm right in saying we also get information from organisations, charities, friends of groups, you name it. So it's not just a case of us gaining information from surveys only. I'm assuming. Ness, do you want to say something on that now? Because I've got a couple of more things I want to say.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Leslie. And actually, in terms of the Local Government Election and Elections Act, we are required as part of developing this annual review, not just to consult with residents, but also local businesses, trade unions, and staff. And so, all of that information that we're gathering is feeding into and has fed into the development of this annual review.
You're on mute, Leslie. Leslie, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just following on from that then, I think Julie's probably right that maybe have another look at how the whole document flows and how it's been put together. I think you're probably missing a trick, that you're missing out bits that would actually enhance the report and sort of give more credence to all the positive things that you're saying in it. But I would also, again, Julie's point about perhaps you're not stressing the challenges. I would suggest in the executive summary, maybe have a paragraph at the end of each of those sections to outline what the future holds, including what challenges are still around that need to be addressed, something like that. Hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Leslie. It's really helpful. David.
Thanks, Chair. I was just picking up on that last point from Councillor Walton. I think there's a good example in page 104 around the positive news around the project manager around carbon reduction. But I think at the end of that paragraph, there could be something put in, which we've discussed here before in the committee, around measuring the actual carbon reduction and also the cost benefit analysis going forward. So I think it's a similar theme to what Councillor Walton was saying about actually putting that bit of vision going forward from this point on. Thank you.
Okay, David.
Yeah, can I just come in to say, I think what we've actually done with this report is try to react to last year's comments where it was too bulky and too big and really difficult to read. So what we've tried to do is to get an easy flow. I think we missed some of the points. Got no issue with amending the report to reflect some of them issues, but it was in response, particularly the council's comments about how long and too detailed was put into the report. So, but note the comments.
Yeah. Thank you for that, David. It's very difficult balance because you want to give the picture, which is a very positive picture. But I think we do miss a trick if we don't present the challenges to take us forward through to the following year. Thank you very much for everyone for your comments on that one. We do have a training session tomorrow as a committee, and I'd like the members that are attending the training to pick this up perhaps during that training meeting, because the training we're having tomorrow is going to give us some information around the new performance framework. So it'd be helpful for us to use this document, and if we've got anything, then Ness, we'll feed that back into you.
That's great. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we can move on then, I'm minded of time, so if we can keep focus on our questioning. Internal audit review of accounts receivable function. Ness, you're going to go through this one?
Yes, happy to do so, Chair. Thank you. So this report is on pages 114 to 124 of your pack, and it provides an update on the progress that we're making in addressing the internal audit recommendations and clearing the Council's age debt backlog. We last gave you an update in July, so this gives you the latest position as at the 30th of September. So section 3 sets out that current position. And probably the most significant thing to highlight is that the current debt over 365 days, as at the 30th of September, was 1.7 million, which is the lowest it has been since we started recording in 2011. Also pleased to report that we have made continued progress on the 3 outstanding internal audit recommendations, although they're not yet all in full compliance, and I'll pick up on that later in my presentation. So if we look at table 1 and paragraph 3.2 of the report, that shows the position in respect of debt over 365 days as at the 15th of January, which was the baseline that we set as a project board to ensure that we could measure progress against a set point in time. And in summary, we have seen a 56.5% reduction in the number of invoices in that cohort and 41.3% in the value of the debt. Of the remaining debt, more than 3/4 is now, you can now attribute to a specific reason for non-payment. So for example, either it's on a payment plan or it's with legal and being pursued through that route. And the remainder is being actively pursued by service areas. So in addition to what's shown in that table, we've also, as part of the project, seen significant progress in reducing utility debt. We have piloted a new payment process with one utility company, and that has been successful, and we are now rolling that out to other companies. So I expect to see a further significant reduction in that level of utility debt within the next 4 to 6 weeks. It's worth noting in paragraph 3.8 that we are now seeing an increase in the number of cases being referred to legal in all age debt categories, so not just those over 365 days. And I'm meeting with the head of legal tomorrow to understand the impact that increased demand is having on our paralegals and whether or not we need additional staff resource in there so that we can ensure that we can maintain progress and momentum. Table 2 in the report shows the position on all outstanding debt as at the 30th of September across all debt categories, and it shows that there has been a reduction in every debt category since January 2024, which is positive. In paragraph 5, I've just highlighted the risk assessment. So the project board, we've not just been looking at trying to address those internal audit recommendations and the age debt, but also to ensure that we have a sustainable system moving forward. And so identified in that assessment the need to manage risks around maintaining the processes we've now put in place, around managing those systems limitations that we've talked about previously, and also ensuring that we continue to have the staff resources we need. So the project board will continue to meet monthly to monitor and manage those risks over the coming months. In conclusion, the conclusions are set out in section 6 of the report, but in summary, I'm pleased to report significant progress in the past 6 months, especially on the older debt backlog, and also that we have implemented 25 of the 28 recommendations. The 3 remaining are low priority or good practice recommendations, and as I've mentioned, we are making progress on those, albeit we don't think we'll complete those probably until the middle of next year as we continue to focus on clearing the debt backlog that we have. So I'll stop there, Chair, but happy to take any questions from colleagues.
Thank you, Ness. I mean, there's a huge amount of work gone into this, and I have to congratulate everyone involved on driving down that outstanding figure. It's a significant achievement that should be recognised for all involved in that. So absolutely well done. There's just one comment I would make. You mentioned in your risk assessment about Oracle could hinder efficient debt tracking, etc. But Jen, you also say in 3.5 that you remain to consider that with Oracle in de novo, yeah, and support partners to address the system. Do you know how long that's going to take before all those issues are bottomed out that you've identified as a risk?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different issues and working on different timelines. So the issue that we had around the VAT line, which we've discussed previously, that could take some time because it's dependent on Oracle being prepared to change the system at a global level, whereas others are a requirement to change aspects of the system which de novo can do on our behalf, because that's about the sort of local processes that we have, which will be done in quicker time. But there is a kind of program of changes that are required across the council, across different parts of the system. And so the change requests in respect of accounts receivable will form part of that and are in a sort of prioritised ranked order. So certainly those things will happen within months, whereas the VAT issue, could take considerably longer depending on Oracle's response.
Thank you, Ness. Okay, if we open up to questions, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Ness, in the conclusion 6.2, in regards to the reminder letters, how many reminder letters do we actually send out to the debtor before we actually take the action of going to legal to perhaps take further action against the debtor?
So standard practice means we send out two reminder letters before we then decide what action to take if the debt isn't paid. But in the cases where those reminder letters are referred to in the conclusion is where we've had debts that are perhaps older and that we haven't had any action on for some time, and we've taken the decision to issue a further reminder to try and stimulate payment before we move to a legal route.
And in the correspondence you sent, do you determine how many days they have to pay that debt?
The letters are worded slightly differently from each other, so I'd need to share that detail with the committee, but it does make clear how long the length of time that payees have to make the payment or to contact us to arrange a different payment arrangement. But in terms of the specific time scales, I'm afraid, Councillor White, I don't have that information to hand.
And I thought whether it was within sort of 14 days or 21 days, and then, okay.
But it doesn't automatically, what we don't do is automatically then forward things to legal. There's then, a process by which we assess, what the cause for the delay is, and try and make contact directly with with the customer to try and resolve the debt before having to go to legal. Legal is the last resort.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Walton.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, partly echo your words. I think this is a good piece of work, and I'm very pleased to see so much of an improvement over the older debts. I was just wondering, you've mentioned Oracle, how much that is still an issue, and are you able to get round the problems of the system?
Yes, thank you. We are getting around. We've got workarounds in place, so that isn't a significant challenge at the moment. The challenge is more just the volume of old debt that we're trying to get through and clear, and the resources that are available to us within service areas who are doing the day job as well as the individuals, as I say, within legal who are now seeing an increase in legal referrals. So it's making sure we've got those staff resources. That's probably the most significant challenge. But once we've got the system more into equilibrium, and you can see the progress we've made over the last 6 months, so if we continue making progress at that pace, we should be in a situation where we are able to manage our debt on a much more immediate basis. Then those issues around staff resources should resolve themselves, and the Oracle systems issues will continue to be worked around until we find longer term solutions.
Thanks, Ness.
Thank you, Councillor Walton. Julie Davis.
Thank you. Ness, this probably follows on from your last statement. Several of the actions noted in Appendix 1 are to remind services of their responsibilities in terms of compliance with accounting procedure rules. How effective do you think these reminders have been in reducing non-compliance?
I think they've been really quite effective. So I now write out to every head of service once a month, including the detail of any debts that are outstanding, any debts that are under dispute, and any debts on which accounts receivable are awaiting evidence, because without evidence we can't proceed with the referral to legal. And as a consequence, we are having much more direct communication between service areas and corporate management team, members of leadership, and the AR and legal teams. So you're just seeing much more flow in communication, but you can also see from the fact that the debt levels in every age category are reducing, that not only are people looking at the old debts, but they're actually looking at the more recent debt too. So you can see we seem to be have been able to unstick the system as a whole. And the challenge for us now is to make sure that we don't lose that, and that we can sustain that over the longer term.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Ness. David?
Thanks, Chair. And just to reiterate the compliment to you, Ness, and the project board, and obviously the positive outcomes of this piece of work. I just wanted to reflect really on this interesting sort of exercise over the last 8 to 9 months. Obviously, it's been quite an intensive project approach to the problem, with a bit of a fixed term extra investment in, obviously, to hasten the positive change. And I just wondered if the council would consider using a very similar approach to other high-risk areas. I'm thinking of safeguarding in particular, and elements of safeguarding. I wonder if the learning from this might inform a similar approach to other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I can certainly take that away and reflect on that with my CMT and leadership colleagues. It's an approach which we do tend to adopt, where we identify there's a particular problem that needs to be solved. And as you say, that sort of focused attention can really help to drive improvement more quickly.
Thanks, Ness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ness. Okay, if there are no more questions on that paper, once again, congratulations to everyone involved in that. And if we can move on now to agenda item 9, which is the absence management and employment of agency workers update. I'm not quite sure who's taken this one. Rachel Davis.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's me. This is for information report on the actions that the Council has been taking in relation to the 2024 internal audit of absence management, but it also contains a brief update for committee on changes to agency provision, which, whilst we hold a substantial internal audit outcome on, I know this has been a topic of interest to the committee previously, hence its inclusion in the report. So the update on sickness data is provided for you in section 3, which, to summarise, shows that Swansea's position with levels of absence is broadly static. We place around mid-table when compared to the other 21 councils, but that doesn't mean that absence is not always a continuing priority for managers to deal with. Some examples are provided within the report in areas with high absence rates, notably catering and cleaning, and the actions that are currently being taken for them. However, I would say with the current policy being somewhat old, it probably hasn't had any substantial change to the content within the last 10 years or so. And also having experienced the pandemic and the impact that that has brought to health and well-being overall, given our static outturn on attendance levels, we have spent some time reviewing the policy principles, and we intend to adopt a new way of managing absence going forward. So this is why the first two recommendations in the internal audit report are not yet addressed. Those on policy and training for managers with a rewritten version means that therefore addressing those recommendations would not perhaps give very much value when we intend to change the approach entirely. So our response to 2.1.2 and 2.1.4 is to rewrite the management of attendance policy with a new focus. Section 4 in the report outlines the steps that we've already taken as part of that process and those that we have got planned. The report also shares an update with committee on, as I said earlier, the recent agency provider transfer. At the beginning of September, the contract was awarded to a new organisation, ALS People, and they have taken on responsibility for corporate agency provision. This excludes social care agency, I should note. They've been very helpful in providing management data. They've spent time on site with key managers and with agency workers, and also with our comms team to ensure that they're delivering regular communications to both their workforce and to managers that are hiring. As it's a brand new contract, we are going to keep in close contact with the relevant managers at ALS over the coming months so that we can continue to have assurance on the service that they're going to be providing. But the first month has shown so far that workers have been paid accurately to time, and the management data that is coming through from them is certainly helpful. There are a couple of examples included within the report. So I'm happy to take questions on either of those topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions on this paper, please? Gordon.
If I take the paragraph 3.2, where you state that an acceptable level seems to be 10 days per annum. If you take weekends and holidays out of that, that's close to about 4.5%, isn't it? Is that a norm in local government? You say that there are no figures for Welsh councils, but there must be figures for other councils in the country. Where do you sit in that league table?
So we are required to submit benchmarking data to the All Wales data benchmarking provision for workforce groups. We are not part of a benchmarking club on a basis that's wider than the Welsh councils. And the report says that, yes, the 23-24 data has not yet been published on that benchmarking hub. We have submitted it back in the summer, so hopefully it might be any day soon. The 10-day is a target. It's subjective, I suppose, as to whether 7 days is acceptable, 4 days is acceptable. At the moment, we know that we are higher than 10 days, so it would be a reasonable target to try to work down to 10 days per FTE. And if you've seen information around the rest of the councils, because we all tend to report on absence outturns at various times, it can range from 7 days, 8 days, right up to 16, 17 days in others. So there's quite a broad range. But at the moment, we believe that a correct target to aim for would be the 10 days. In terms of the bank holidays, the weekends, etc., the calculations are done on working days.
Right, which equates to probably about a day a month.
Well, it's 12, yeah, it's 12 days, so one per month.
Okay, and can I ask you on paragraph 5.2, the removal of the 28-day automatic referral to occupational health, does that suggest you're then expecting managers to assess whether occupational health is the relevant route to go down or not? And
Yeah.
if so, have they been trained and do they have the skills to do that?
So at the moment, the default blanket is everyone should be referred to occupational health at 28 days. And we know that that is meaning that capacity is small within the occupational health service because we're approaching that blanket approach to everybody. Occupational health referrals are far better if they are targeted on an individual need. So somebody who is going off for, let's say, a planned operation with a fixed recovery time, which will go beyond 28 days, there's probably little value in using an occupational health appointment because we probably know what the response will be from occupational health. There might conversely be people who have been off for a matter of days, and given the complexity of what the situation might be, they would probably benefit from an earlier occupational health appointment than the 28 days. So we are going to be moving towards a needs-based approach rather than treating everyone as individuals, depending on their circumstances, rather than treating everyone in the same manner. So the training aspect of that, the team in HR are currently working on toolkits and guidance and training offers for managers so that they are able to use better judgment and decision-making skills to know when the right time to take action, such as an occupational health referral, might be needed. But we would also like to see managers taking proactive decisions around agreeing things such as phased returns, like duties, etc., without always having to seek occupational health advice in the first instance, because in the majority of cases, those things can be agreed without the need of occupational health to support people back into the workplace.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike White.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, in regards to the key performance indicators, and also you touched on education. Now, within education, teachers, the schools are signed up to an insurance scheme. So if the teacher is off X amount of days, the schools can then claw back some of that funding from the payment. Would it be perhaps worth the council perhaps inquiring regarding teacher assistants, because we've got quite a lot of teacher assistants working alongside professional teachers in school, where perhaps a similar scheme could be introduced, and that would take the pressure then off those schools. No, we're not, they obviously I'm going to sort of go out sort of on a daily basis looking for sort of different teaching assistants and also or agency, which then bumps up the costs.
In relation to the specifics around the insurance fund, I'd need to check with education colleagues on whether support staff are included within that scheme or if it is just the teachers. But I can take your comments back to education colleagues who are responsible for the supply insurance fund and ask that feedback on.
Yeah, it is at the moment just the professionals, just the teachers. But I think it could perhaps be advantageous to us as a local authority and to the schools. Could I ask as well in regards to the issue with managers training and referring to occupational health? Now, if an employee has obviously got a medical certificate from a professional GP or consultant, surely, I don't think the onus really then should be put on managers to sort of make a decision whether they can be referred to occupational health. Do you think that could be a sort of a concern that might come back and bite us as an authority?
So we would always prioritise the fit note advice from a GP. And if somebody has got a fit note for a certain period of time, then that is reasonable and we would agree to implement that. If a GP provides information on it might help you return to work if you had A, B and C, then of course we would expect a manager to consider that recommendation from a GP without necessarily needing to have occupational health information on top. But our training that we're going to put together will be around those soft people judgment making skills. We don't intend to train people on the policy. Training can sometimes be around, here's a new policy, this is what you need to do to follow it. We would like to invest our time and resources in helping managers develop their soft people skills to make those judgment calls. Obviously with advice and support from HR where needed, but with flowcharts and toolkits and step-by-step how-to guides, then we hope that there'll be sufficient information for them to feel supported to make those decisions.
Could I ask as well, Julie, if perhaps the person isn't able to perhaps go back to the original role, have we still got the part within the policy where they can apply and perhaps be trained for an additional post? Is that still available?
Absolutely, yeah. We would always rather medically redeploy somebody into a role that they are physically capable of doing if it's not their substantive job that they are initially employed by the council on. We are a large organisation. We do have lots of vacancies that come up throughout the year, and we do have a number of people who, for whatever reason, might not be able to continue in their role, and we do successfully redeploy a number of those. So yes, that is always a priority to try and redeploy before having to consider whether the person can continue in employment.
Okay, thank you, Julie. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Walton and then Julie Davis.
Thanks. Really just a couple of observations. One, I'm very pleased to see we're taking on so many permanent staff, which means we don't have to use so much agency staff, which I always thought was a good thing. And the discussion we've just been having about referrals, I think it's absolutely essential that we don't pigeonhole anybody's circumstance. And the idea of just you refer them all after 28 days sounds pretty ridiculous to me. So I'm very pleased to know that instead you're looking at individual cases and reacting to that case and their particular situation, which I also think it works both ways. One, it works for the person, which means it will also work better for us because they will then feel that they're being considered as an individual, not just one of many employees. And hopefully that will mean that when they are ready to come back, they feel that they've been treated fairly and are able to come back, hopefully sooner rather than later. So good on both counts. Thank you.
Thank you. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned, Rachel, in paragraph 4.3 that the draft policy is now complete, and then in the next paragraph you outline next steps. Could you tell me when you intend to bring the policy to Governance and Audit Committee, please?
So we're currently in consultation with trade unions. We've approached this policy review in social partnership with them by setting out principles before we even took pen to paper for the policy review. And that was done with a range of different stakeholders. So the leadership group, CMT, other colleagues across the council who have had interest and experience with management of absence. We intend to also talk to our equalities workforce group as well, to make sure that we really are getting a full cross-section of views and contributions to the formation of it. The next scheduled meeting is 4th of November, I believe, whereby trade unions will come back around the table and for us to finalise the bits that haven't yet been talked through in a level of detail. And we are hopeful that at that point then that policy is going to be ready to be considered at JCC. So we've got a little bit of work to do yet, but I think we're very nearly almost there.
Okay,
so
thank you.
Yeah, sometime soon, not too long.
Okay, and it would also be useful for future reports if we could see the costs of agency staff and whether you can make a link between the absence rates going down and the reduction in both the numbers in terms of FTEs and the cost to the council of improved sickness rates.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that comment back.
Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Thanks, Chair. Rachel, just in regard to just a quick one on the end of paragraph 6.5, it mentions about a new social care agency framework coming into force by 1st of April next year. I just wondered, obviously a bit of detail on that, but I'm obviously pressured for time today, but also whether we see a separate sort of outcomes for that particular framework, both as Julie mentioned in regard to cost and everything, at a future meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd have to speak to colleagues who are leading on that piece of work, as you know, it's not something that I'm particularly close to at the moment. So I'll get a response for you from colleagues in social care.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you for that. It may be helpful, I think, if when the policy is finalised and it's embedded, if perhaps we could arrange for a training slot for how the council manages sickness and absence and agency costs at a future governance and audit committee training session, maybe for 2025. So if you can add that, Jeremy, to the one of the suggestions, and hopefully Ines can help us with that one. If we can move on then, I'm minded of time now. These reports are for information, but it doesn't prevent us from asking questions that we think need to be asked. Agenda item 10, welcome Councillor Peter Black. You're going to quickly present this one for us.
Yes, thank you, Chair. You've seen the report in front of you. We do our best to liaise with scrutiny and audit on governance and audit, it is now called, of course, to try to make sure that we're not duplicating work, and also that we do try to cover the wide range of functions which the council is responsible for. The report is very much self-explanatory. The programme, we do a scrutiny work programme every year as a conference. You yourself as chair are invited along with every other councillor, and we try to put together our programme accordingly on that basis, and make sure that in doing that, if there's issues that come up which we believe belongs to governance and audit, that we refer you to them accordingly, and I believe you do the same to us. And of course, you've already referred a couple of times in this meeting to one of the scrutiny panels which takes place. So I think that's all I can really say. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Yeah, I would concur with that. You know, it's important for me to link in with yourself and also the work of other scrutiny arenas to ensure that we do make sure that our committees are working most effectively and efficiently, and not to overburden officers of the council. Are there any questions for Councillor Black? I don't have any. It's just a very comprehensive report, and a lot of work has been done, Peter, throughout the year on that. So well done to the work that's been done at that committee. Julie.
Thank you, Chair. This isn't a question. I just wanted to say that it's pleasing to note the positive impact that scrutiny has had in terms of raising the profile of procurement in the council, because we do get quite a number of findings in relation to procurement. So I'd like to recognise that good work.
Yeah, I think we did do an inquiry into procurement and made some recommendations on that. So yeah, absolutely, and that's the value of scrutiny. You can go in depth in those particular issues and make suggestions to the executive, which hopefully they will then adopt.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Peter. And if you can convey our thanks. Oh, Councillor Mike White.
Just to follow what Julie said, yes, follow that in-depth inquiry on procurement, because we were getting a lot of issues regarding the procurement process around schools. And now I'm pleased to report, following that procurement inquiry, the schools have now got a proper protocol that they can follow when they're ordering work to be carried out in schools. So they've got guidance on that now to assist them.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions, then thank you for coming in this afternoon, Peter. I appreciate that.
Thank you. Cheers.
Agenda item 11 is Social Services Directorate Internal Control. I'm not quite sure who's presenting this. Nobody available. Okay, then if we can, we've had apologies from David, but if we can Are there any questions on this that we can perhaps ask Ness to take back if there are? Ness, do you want to say anything? You're on mute, Ness.
Sorry, as it's for information only, we're happy to take questions. And as you say, there's nobody available. It's the annual Social Services Conference today. So that's where our director and heads of service are. But I'm happy to take back any questions that colleagues may have.
Okay. The only comment I'd make is that if for the future report, I think the Appendix A risk issues on a page is the corporate risks, when I would have hoped to have seen the Directorate's own risk register in detail on that report. But I'm happy to receive an update on this at the next rotation when David is available. Okay, so
thank you, Chair.
Is there no other comments? David?
Just Ness, on the page treble 2, there's an issue about the Welsh Government National Community Care System, and the implementation is due by I'm not sure if it's the end of March next year, but I just wanted to ask what the latest position was, because there's a funding issue on this in regard to implementation. Thank you.
Thank you. So, yeah, there is a procurement process underway at the moment, and it's actually 2026, April 2026. The current system goes out of support. And in terms of, yes, there is the WLGA is putting together a business case for local government as a whole in terms of the support that we need, the financial support we need in order to implement the new system. And so that process is underway at the moment, and we await the outcome of that business case and how it lands with Welsh Government.
Thanks, Ness. And just also a compliment to David as well in regard to his continuing integrated work, both at regional and local level, which I saw on 4.1 to 4.3. So compliment to him on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then if we can move on to agenda item 12, which is the annual complaints and compliments report. Sarah with us today? Yeah. Welcome, Sarah. If you can go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of information in the report, but just to give a very brief summary before taking questions. 3 appendices. Appendix A about the corporate complaints. So showing there a slight increase in stage 1 corporate complaints, 44% justified, and a slight rise in stage 2. And we think the change this year is because we've introduced the new system, if you remember, in July last year. So we've definitely had much better reporting. We're able to deal with complaints much quicker. And we've also seen just a general uptick in compliance. So as you can see later on in Appendix A, 85% almost responded to within the timescales in the policy compared to 65% last year, so a significant improvement. But also we've seen compliments are also up. So I think we're seeing generally better reporting across the board, not just on the complaints side, but also on compliments. Appendix B is obviously the social services information. Both adults and child and family stage 1 complaints are down, you'll see. And for adults in particular, a quarter of their complaints were from one person. So that should be taken into account looking at those figures. Stage 2 numbers remain relatively low for adults. You'll see generally investigation costs are up. This is because of the complex nature of complaints. They're taking longer, and they're obviously involving sometimes more agencies as well. And investigator costs have also, their individual fees have risen. There's been an inflationary rise with that. Child and family, as I mentioned, stage 1 complaints are down. Stage 2, slightly higher, but still the numbers are relatively low. And the justified complaints for child and family were the same as the previous year. Compliments are down, but you'll see that the numbers are actually returning more to 2022 levels. So it's or it looks like there's a sort of an increase, an unusual increase last year. It's more to the normal levels. And Appendix C, you'll see, is the Ombudsman letter is attached. We've tried to bring the report this year so that we can include the letter and the report all at the same time. So we've been able to bring it earlier. 12 cases investigated by the Ombudsman. And you'll also see a new indicator in the letter as well about our speed of responding to the recommendations. This is new from the Ombudsman this year at 63%, which puts us about mid-table compared to other councils. But we are looking at this to see how we can improve that then in future years with regard to the timescales. It's usually the timescale that we agree with the Ombudsman around how we can implement those recommendations in services. So if that's taking a little bit longer, sometimes we're looking at how we can look at negotiate that as a longer timescale to give services longer to do it. Thank you, Chair. Very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Before I open up for questions, can I just remind members of the Governance and Audit Committee, within the terms of reference for this committee, we have to review and assess the authority's ability to handle complaints and to make any associated reports and recommendations in relation to the authority's ability to handle complaints effectively. The detail of complaints is dealt with in another arena, but we need to take confidence that from the information that is within this annual report, we believe that there's an effective process adopted, and some of that will be by timescales, etc. So if you can just bear that in mind with the questions, then I'll open up for questions. Julie?
Thank you, Chair. In Appendix C, it states that 11% of complaints to the Ombudsman related to complaints handling. Now, unfortunately, the report doesn't analyse the number of complaints actually upheld by subject, but do you envisage any further improvements in terms of the processes, monitoring and recording process that's recently been implemented?
I would anticipate, yes. I think that's probably the case. And sometimes the complaints handling could be where I think for some of them we find that we haven't been able to respond on time because of specific areas. So sometimes in order to be able to say do a repair, we have to have time to actually then complete that repair. Sometimes we've been unable to get hold of complainants when we're trying to finalise what that complaint is. So there's a whole host of reasons why we may not have been able to reach timescale. But I think with the new system, we're getting much more detailed information, and we're working closely with services so that we can get that compliance up. So I'd hope to see that in future years improve, yes.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Thanks, Jeff. In regard to the report, obviously it's good to see the improvements and everything else as a positive measure. And also I like to see in the case studies in the report as well. It gives a good human factor in the report. Just one issue for me really in regard to the external investigators. And I think you mentioned that obviously the rising costs per investigator and everything. I just wonder if you're looking at alternatives to that, might be a bit more economical. Thank you.
From a legislative perspective, we have to have either an external investigator or an independent person for social services. That is a requirement by law. So we are obviously looking at different independent investigators. There's not many of them across Wales, but we have had a recruitment drive recently to look at, and we talk to other councils as well, the investigators they have, look at who we can, if we can take more on, what kind of rates they operate on. Sometimes it is, as I say, though, the complaints are becoming more complex and therefore take longer to investigate. And for those very complicated ones, you do need quite experienced investigators. You're dealing with sometimes historic and very difficult, complicated problems, and being able to deal with them in the most sensitive and effective way. We've got to make sure we've got the best investigators to be able to do that and have the best outcomes for individuals and for the council. So it is a complex area. I think we're just keeping an eye on that in terms of what the fees could look like, and as more investigators may become available, what their rates may be. But it is someone that we're monitoring closely.
Okay, thanks for that. I just wonder, again, as you mentioned, talking to other councils and maybe such other bodies as health boards, where there could be a sort of a partnership arrangement amongst the at a regional level, at least in regard to that, just to look at those costs. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you. I've just got one or two comments. On page 241, with regards to stage 1 complaints, you confirm that complaints had been dealt with by service departments concerned and hopefully resolved. Can you confirm if there's any quality review undertaken on that process? So if complaints are going to the department from which that service has been delivered, how are we assured that those complaints have been dealt with effectively? Is there a quality assurance review?
Our not a formal one, Chair. No, there isn't a formal one, but our complaints team obviously oversee that. So previously, before we had the system, the new system, then it would be a case of us following up and requesting information. Whereas now, obviously, all that information is transparent to the complaints team within the system. So letters sent, when letters were sent, any emails relating to a complaint are all now in the system. So they are fully viewable by the complaints team. It is also looked at as part of the internal audit that happens every 3 years. So in terms of assurance, we had the audit last year, which came out as substantial. Audit will also look at complaints, not just obviously that's handled by the corporate complaints team and social services, but that's happened in services. So it's the full process across complaints.
Thank you. And following on from that, on paragraph 3.3, page 257, it stated that added services, almost a quarter of stage 1 complaints were received from one complainant. I'm just wondering if there's any independent action that needs to be taken with regards to that, picking up from the first point I've raised.
I think that's unusual to the particular case involved, and that's now been resolved.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me. Are there any other questions? Councillor Mike White?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, as you see from in the service area complaints on page there for 2024, the 3 main areas of concern are obviously frontline services, and sometimes a lot of those complaints are out of our control anyway. You know, perhaps with highways and maintenance, and that was, you know, things that the work has got to be carried out. But also, I'd like to comment as well, it was lower down, but at least they are going in the proper direction with complaints coming in. But just to point that out, Chair, plus a lot of these are obviously out of the council's control, you know, when those services have been carried out.
Thank you. No other questions on that paper? Can I thank you, Sarah, for presenting the report? It's very comprehensive, and it's quite positive in many ways, really. And I think we can take assurance that the council is effective in handling its complaints and compliments process. So thank you for that. If we can move on then to agenda item 13, which is Ben, Revenue Capital Budget Monitoring.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be extremely brief, given this has been to Cabinet and has also had a very in-depth scrutiny at the Finance Scrutiny Panel of both the leader and myself. The report is self-explanatory in terms of unders and overs, but the key message is look at this authority compared to 21 others. You've got tales of woe and pressures everywhere. A report that says at first quarter, £500,000 adrift is nothing to be worried about in current year. Yes, there are concerns around the amount that is underpinned by one-off use of reserves, etc. But I go back to the point I made earlier, particularly with Julie, which is I see success on outturn because outturn enabled me to put £12 million additionally into contingency, and Cabinet has made a number of very substantial interventions to social care and homelessness to ensure that services are maintained. And frankly, as I say, take a step back, compared to other authorities, £500,000 adrift, and I reiterate another at least £7 million on underspend on capital financing as a result of the robust treasury management strategy on top. I see no concerns for the authority for the current year. I'm sure concerns will persist going forward, and that was referenced in the Audit Wales Financial Resilience Report. But you couldn't expect for better, and if you expect better, then you don't recognise that Swansea's in a very fortunate position for the current year, is my overall officer advice. Not smug, not resting on laurels. There are difficulties to come, but there's only one inexorable conclusion you can draw from the first quarter report, and I would advise committee that they should be incredibly assured on the financial position in the current year. There may be differences of view in terms of future years.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate the context around that. Questions from members, please. Any hands up? Enough. Okay, that's. Can I just ask one question, Ben? It's not about necessarily the content of the report and the assurance you've just given. It's just a query on the on page 299 in the box around home to school transport costs. Just a query really as to, has that school transport cost ever been fully reviewed for best value?
It has been reviewed. It will continue to be reviewed, I am sure, by receiving colleagues. Most of our services were subject to a service review over the previous years of the transformation agenda. There is inexorable spend pressures, and I'd fully provided for it in setting the budget in the first case, which is why there was a significant release from central inflation. And it was an unusual one because we don't normally have over £10 million environments, and it was one that could only be environment by Cabinet. So again, committee should be assured that where it exceeds my delegated authority, the appropriate decision was placed on record for Cabinet to make the decision, which was so taken.
Okay, thank you, Ben. And a final point is you talk about high-risk directorates, you know, with some overspends. I mean, there are some big ones, you know, in social care, I guess. I'm just wondering, you know, the work that Ness has been doing on accounts receivable and the additional focus, is there, you reviewing monthly and looking at the spend or the overspend month on month, is there any need for us to go in a bit more frequently where things are really going off-piste?
My view at the moment is no, because they're not going off-piste because of local arrangements in Swansea. They're going off-piste because there isn't sufficient funding in the system for homelessness or social care. If it was something that I felt was was specifically only to Swansea, I would be much more concerned, Chair. But the pressures in those two areas are entirely because of a position that you would find replicated in 21 other authorities and probably 200 more up and down the land. So if it was a specific, yes, but it's not a specific issue. It's a systemic, endemic one across all authorities, and I remain satisfied that monthly through the PFM process, the performance finance monitoring process, is appropriate, even for those areas where there is significant overspend. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ben. If there are no other questions, then if we can move on quickly to...
Sorry, Chair, I had one quick question.
Sorry, Julie.
But my Wi-Fi was playing up just as you asked for questions. Ben, could I just have one small question about the Appendix 1? You note permitted temporary overspending underwriting social services, Cabinet decision pending, but in brackets you've got intention pre-announced. Can you explain how that fits in terms of sound governance, please?
Yes, absolutely. So the outturn report went in July, and that indicated at least a £12 million underspend on contingency, which enabled us to make that commitment. The leader announced in his leader announcement that he was minded to make that underwrite because it was clear there was an immediate overspend pressure in social services. But of course, rightly and constitutionally, the leader and I advised Cabinet that he couldn't actually commit that decision on the outturn report for the following year. So that's why it references that it was pre-announced. It was an intent announced at Cabinet in July the decision was made at this September's cabinet, along with a number of other triaging arrangements. So I am absolutely happy that it was fully in accordance with decision taking and making. The decision could not be actually taken until cabinet received the report on the first quarter in the current year, but because of the substantial numbers of areas of underspend and carry forward into the new year, the leader and I were able to advise cabinet that it was entirely appropriate to indicate very, very early on that there would be immediate triage support for social care, and that was then followed up at first quarter by immediate triage support for homelessness to give assurance to the service. It goes back to the leader's point made earlier that otherwise there would have to be more difficult interventions. It's why it was so advantageous to have that significant underspend at year end, which has given us lots of levers and flexibility. So I'm happy that governance was duly followed. It enabled also scrutiny to scrutinise the arrangements. So it was just an early warning one. It was so big, it was right that it was flagged early, but the decision was not taken until it was appropriate and right to take the decision constitutionally, Julie.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Okay, I'd like to move forward if that's possible. Rob, is it urgent that you want to come in?
No, Chair, and I will write to you following this meeting because I am attending this meeting as the Cabinet Member for Finance.
Yeah, that's fine.
I do intend to indicate to you that I wish to speak, but I'll forgo my opportunity to speak at this occasion. I'll raise my concerns with you in private. Thank you.
If it's important, Rob, you can raise it now.
No,
and just...
no, Chair, you want to make progress, I won't intervene further. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, agenda item 14 is next, the governance and assurance arrangements of the Council's strategic partnerships.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report is here for information if any members have any questions, but it's basically our 5 strategic partnerships and provide an update on their kind of governance and assurance.
Are there any questions on this paper, please? Yeah. Previously, we've asked for key challenges and achievements to be contained. It's a bit like the previous report. You've got a lot of what's been done, but not a lot about the challenges. And if I could just pick up on 5.4, you talk about re-establishing the Governance and Audit Subcommittee for the SWWCJC. I've previously commented that we've not met since we've agreed to terms of reference, going back a year or so now. But I have had a call yesterday to say that the November meeting's been cancelled again, and they're suggesting maybe a training session to update what's happened through the CJC, to use the meeting date for that. And I've also asked if we can have exposure as to what's gone on through the scrutiny meetings which have taken place. I'm waiting for confirmation that that will happen. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other comments on this paper? Very informative paper, important area that we need to keep an eye on. Obviously, you've got the Corporate Joint Committee, you've got the City Bay. So if we can keep an update on that, that would be helpful. Quarter 4 and end of year performance monitoring. Lee again?
Yeah, again for information, Chair. It's been through a number of other forums, so happy to pick up any questions from members.
I found this difficult to go through in the current format, if I'm honest. Is this one going to be reformatted in the way that the other is going to be, or is this going to be the style?
I'll have a look at it, Chair. It's a very separate. So when I presented the report earlier, I said it was different to our kind of quarterly and end of year regime. So what you have is, I think what's making it difficult is you basically get the PDF printouts from the in-phase system. Let me have a look. We perhaps could present that better. I'm not sure what the options are, but let me take that away and have a look at it.
Yeah, there's a lot of information in the document, and I could take another hour to go through the queries I've got in the way it's formatted.
Mm-hmm.
But rather than take up a huge amount of time during this meeting, I just wonder if we can have a conversation outside of the meeting.
Yeah. I'll catch up with you, Chair.
Yeah. Which is the best way to report to the Governance and Audit Committee, to give us all the the key factors and rather than give us such a lot of information.
More than happy to.
And it could be that we can pick it up in the training session again tomorrow. So we can bring both reports to the training session to see what's available to us. Is that okay? Are there any questions for anyone? Julie? And next.
Thank you, Chair. Lee, in Appendix 1, I'd like to understand how the RAG status is afforded to each of the wellbeing objectives, because looking at the individual performance indicators, some of them are flagged red, for example, in social services, and yet when I look at this report, they're assessed as green. So I was wondering what the relative weighting is for assessing the RAG status of the individual objectives.
That's determined by the individual strategic lead. So they go through
Right.
the information quarterly, and they look at obviously the steps, the measures, the PIs, and then give that overall rating. But again, that's something I can take back to the strategic leads and just see how we present that better. And also how they analyze it. So it's how they analyze that information and come up with that kind of rating. Let me take that back to the strategic leads, and we'll have a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay then. Sorry, Leslie Walton.
Yeah, just really a couple of procedural questions. I noticed that the two reports, one of them goes back, well, in fact, the report we're on now, but we've got the next one back to Q4, and I'm a bit puzzled as to why we're getting it 6 months later. And also, just are we now going to then get the quarterly reports every quarter? Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Walton, there's been a delay in bringing Q4 end of year, which I apologise for. In terms of the quarterly, yes, you'll be getting them now more in line with the kind of procedure and timings going through other forums.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to sort of talk a bit more about the nature of this report and the role of governance and audit in terms of it coming here, because this report is an internal report, and it is, as Lee said, is produced from the system. And we agreed in a previous governance and audit committee that you wanted to have sight of reports that go through to cabinet that relate to the council's performance, so that you could assure yourself as a committee that there is an appropriate performance management system in place, rather than going through all of the detail of all of those management reports, which obviously takes place in the scrutiny forum. Yeah. So we just need to take care, because what we can't do, what we don't have the resources to do, is to produce a different format report for the purposes of this committee. We need to try and make use of one report rather than going through the process of creating additional burdens on officers. And we also need to make sure that we are sharing with the report the information with you in order for the committee to be able to fulfil its role, but distinct from that role of scrutiny. So I perhaps it's something we can pick up tomorrow in the training session, and also separately, Chair, if you want to have a further discussion on it. But I am concerned that I don't want us to end up having to produce a different format report for this committee when the reports we have there fulfil the needs of cabinet and scrutiny.
I absolutely agree with that. And can I suggest that we have a look at the terms of reference, because there are 3 areas where it talks about the role of the Governance and Audit Committee with regards to performance. And I think it'd be helpful to pick it up at the training session tomorrow as well. But I wouldn't want reports written for us which are different to other reports just for our needs. That's not what I'm looking for. It's it's my mind to produce a report once for all purposes.
Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for that. If we can move on then, the next 2 items, item 17 is the audit tracker. Oh, I've missed one above. Sorry. trying to get to the end too quick.
It's the Q1 report.
Yeah, I got it. Lee again?
Yeah, it's similar comments from me, Chair. It's been through the usual process. It's here for information. It's probably in a similar format to the kind of comments you've just raised.
Okay, so we can pick that up again in respect of the other. Okay, so thank you for that, Jeremy. Now we're on the tracker. Are there any comments on the tracker? I think we've got dates in for all the additional information that we do to receive. Any comments on that? No. The work plan is obviously a living document. If there are any changes that need to be made, if we can plan for 2025 for the sickness absence agency. And there was also comments before of social enterprise community resilience for 2025 for training. There are no more comments on that. I think that brings us to the end of that huge agenda. Thank you for everyone that's been involved in your comments and participation was really helpful and really valued. So thank you very much for everyone for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye bye.